So, B'Shem Hashem, Baruch Hashem, we're starting today the second section of Likutei Amorim on page 150. And I said specifically the second section of Likutei Amorim because that is the first line on page 150. It says Likutei Amorim Chelik Sheni, which becomes the header for this page and the following page, Ayin Vav. And the three lines, the 4 lines from Likutei Amorim Chelik Sheni till before the word Chanoich, which is in a box, is considered the Sharblat, the title page of the second section of Tanya. So I want you to turn back, those that have a sefer with them, to the title page of the first section of Tanya, and you'll notice almost the exact same language. Isser, you have it? Look, it says Sefer Likutei Amorim, right? So here it doesn't say the word Sefer. But Likutei Amorim, Chelik Rishon. And here it says on page 150, Chelik Sheni. Hanikra B'Shem, that's called with the name, look over here, Hanikra B'Shem, Chinuch Kotten. The chinuch, the education of the minor, or better said, a miniature type of chinuch. We're going to talk about that in what we're going to learn today and this week. But the language is analogous to the language on the title page of the first section of Tanya. So this teaches us, this is the way Chabad tradition shares a 200-year tradition, that the Alter Rebbe, instead of writing like he did in the first sefer, the first section of Tanya, a separate title page, here he combines the title page together with the introduction. The introduction for the first section of Tanya is later on page, what would be Gimel. There's no Gimel on there, but it's opposite page Dalet. Hagdomas Hamalakit, the introduction of the compiler. And then it gives us a letter that the Alter Rebbe wrote when the Tanya was printed in some form in 1795. In 1795, before the actual printing of the Tanya in a book form, in a sefer, it was already, either all or part of it was already in copy form. In other words, people copied from in their own handwriting what was known as the Tanya. And at that time, the Alter Rebbe wrote a letter of introduction to his work, the Tanya, called Hakdamas Hamalakit, the introduction of the compiler. Okay? Here, on page 150, for the second section of Tanya, we also have an introduction that the Alter Rebbe wrote. But different than the first section, where he separated the title page from the introduction, here the title page comes together with the introduction. Isser, is what I said now clear or not? Okay. So now, another point I point out to you is that here he doesn't mention what traditionally is the name for the next section, which is called Shar HaYichud V'Emunah. Turn to page 152. In the header, it says Shar HaYichud V'Emunah, the gates of unity and faith. who gave a name to this second section, Shara Yichud V'Emunah? The author, the Alter Rebbe. And when we get to this page 152, you'll see why he calls it Shara Yichud V'Emunah. But go back to 150. In 150, it doesn't say that Likutei Amorim Chelik Sheni is called Shara Yichud V'Emunah. It's called Likutei Amorim Chelik Sheni. Hanikra, which is also called, kind of, its nickname is also Chinuch Kotten. So it's very interesting. A page later, he calls it Shara Yichud V'Emunah. But in the introduction, when he introduces his theses, his 12 chapters, his 12 chapters of Shara Yichud V'Emunah, he doesn't even call it Shara Yichud V'Emunah. But that's another name for the Sefer. Now, it's important to realize right from the beginning, when you call it Likutei Amorim Chelik Sheni, what we understand from that is that there's a direct connection to Chelik Rishon. There's the first part and the second part. And in thinking about this, to me, at this point, I would say that this applies to the average man, the Beinani. Although the theme in the second section is not about Beinani, it's about God, unity of God, faith in God, reconciliation of the universe with God. But he's saying it's called Likutei Amorim, which is meaning I've collected teachings, which the Alter Rebbe said out of his great modesty, because we know that he wrote this, and there's so few quotes in the first 53 chapters that we learned that he openly says, I took it from the Baal Shem Tov, I took it from the Magid, I took it from the Maral, I took it from the Shalah. Hardly any. So why does he call it a collection of saying, I'm just collecting information? Well, show me the information you collected. Who'd you collect from? You don't find it. So Hasidim explain that really it's his original writing. It's the Alter Rebbe's original piece. Okay? But as a modest person, especially given the time period in which he wrote it, he wasn't going to say, and he doesn't say, I wrote it. Like Rabbi Dalfin says, I wrote this book and I wrote that book. That's not the way they spoke 200 years ago, especially not a person like the Alter Rebbe. He hid the fact that he was the author, or tried hiding. Okay? But nevertheless, it's called Likutei Amorim Chelik Sheni. So that means, Yoini, that the ideas of Chelik Rishon, which is about the Beinani, has direct impact and connection to Chelik Sheni. You don't call something the second part to the first part if there's no connection. So obviously there is a connection. And we need to remember what I'm telling you now throughout the 12 chapters that we're going to be studying for probably a good 6 months. Maybe less, whatever. That although we're going to talk about faith and unity of God and some flutin' ideas of how God creates the world, and is he here and how is he here? How could the world exist? I mean, you've said it in Chitas, those that say Chitas, you've learned it, I think some of you with Chavrusa and everything else. And I'm going to tell you a few more things that you might not know, which are interesting about this second section in a moment. Nevertheless, it's talking to us, to the average person. This Chelik Sheni is, and that's why it's Chelik Sheni. It's Chelik Sheni to the first Chelik, which talks about the Beinani. And when you think about it, it's awesome. For those that have learned this already, have taken a taste. I think Yisr Moshe, some of you had a Chavrusa, I don't even call now. Hillel, right? On one hand, some of the ideas is like so deep. so profound. It's like God, the Alter Rebbe is taking you into his brain, a journey into the Alter Rebbe's brain. Can you imagine what that means? Lahavdil, a journey into Einstein's brain. Who can imagine a genius going into his brain? Well, that's what the Alter Rebbe does in these 12 chapters. He's taking you into his brain of reconciling God and the universe, God's unity, and faith in God. Wonderful. What an opportunity. But it's for us. Even though he's taking us into his brain, he's taking us into his brain. He's telling us, I know you're not like me, a tzaddik. Again, paraphrasing. Alter Rebbe would never say that. But I want you to know that these ideas are relevant to you as an average person. Because if you do not understand how God is united with the world, and your belief in God has not been developed, you are lacking something in your relationship with God. And therefore, your love for God and your awe for God will be lacking. And this explains another important fundamental teaching. The Alter Rebbe, in this introduction, and in a few places, says, Kemoshi is boer, as I will explain further on. Those references are clearly a reference to what he explained already in the first chapter, in the first section. So why does he write, Kemoshi yizbaer? You all went to Ulpan? Yizbaer means future. How would we say it in past? K'moy shenizba'er, with a nun, as it was already explained. It doesn't say that. So Hasidim related over 200 years from when the Tanya was printed in the 1790s, that the Alter Rebbe originally wanted to publish and print the second section first. For whatever reason, he changed and he published the first section first. That's amazing. 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 And we'll talk about that over the next few classes too, why he did that. And this explains also the idea that the Tanya second section, Hanikra B'Shem Chinuch Kotten. What kind of name is Chinuch Kotten? What does Chinuch Kotten mean? So you say the Chinuch, the education of a Kotten, of a minor. We're talking about education here, principles? No, it's wrong. It's not Chinuch Kotten, the education of the minor. It's a type of education regarding God that's considered minor in comparison to a greater type of education. And Alter Rebbe is saying, you should know that what you're going to learn in these 12 chapters is applicable to us because we're minors. Because we are potential Beinanim, we're not Tzaddikim. The tzaddikim would be considered gedolim. And beinanim are considered, in comparison to tzaddikim, ktanim. I don't know if the Rebbe said this, but this is something that comes to my mind, so I share it as a possibility. Now, but why he doesn't say over here, Shara Yichud Ve'emunah, right in the title page, I don't know, but again, a possibility. This is only my thought. Shara Yichud Ve'emunah, when you say the words, it right away you back off. Wait, no, it's scary. What do you mean scary? Portals of unity and faith. It's like the guide, More HaNevuchim. I grew up knowing you don't go anywhere near the More HaNevuchim. It's off limits. No. Or like those that grew up with Kabbalah, Stay far away. I don't want to hear it. Right? Shara Yichud ve'emunah, if it would have been written right here, it would almost contradict chinuch katan, the words chinuch katan. Chinuch katan implies this is something that is relevant and applicable to us as katan. Yeah, I'm a regular guy, I'm an average person, I'm a katan. And then at the same time, you would tell me, Shara Yichud ve'emunah, portals of unity and faith. It's a contradiction. That sounds very sophisticated, very aloof, very elite. So possibly that's why the Alter Rebbe did not write it on the title page. This is again my own thought, right or wrong. Although later, a page later, when he actually starts his treatise, his 12 chapters, the title that is there is Shar HaYichud Ve'emunah. The truth is, I don't know, and I don't have access to the manuscripts. I'm not even sure now. I'm thinking, did the Alter Rebbe actually write the header beginning with chapter 1 as Shar HaYichud Ve'emunah? I'm going to try, with Hashem's help, maybe to see if I can get an answer to that. I'm not even sure that he himself wrote that, or the printer wrote it based on what the Alter Rebbe said. I don't know, but everyone calls it Shar HaYichud Ve'emunah. So let's now go to page 150. But before we go, are there any questions on what I said now? I want to, because...
Yeah, Rabbi, what? Yeah. Rabbi, one question, because you touched on it. I want to, from my understanding, from learning with you, Tanya, and other things, my understanding is that the Alter Rebbe, did not consider himself to be a tzaddik. We all considered him to be a tzaddik, obviously, everybody in the world. But he himself, I don't think he referred to himself. As far as what I learned from you, is that he seemed to be talking about himself and about everybody else being a Beinuni. And that's the reason for really writing Tanya.
A good point. And I'll answer you with what would the Alter Rebbe bring in the first page of Tanya. Rabbah. Did Rabbah consider himself to be a tzaddik? What's the answer? No. And he says, Kegoyin ani beinani. So Rabbah, 2,000 years ago, who surely was a tzaddik, didn't consider himself a tzaddik. And the same is true with the Alter Rebbe. Although it's 2,000 years later, but trust me, if he was around during Rabbah's time, he would have been one of the sages in the Gemara. Guaranteed. I'll put everything on it, okay? He wrote a Shulchan Aruch at the age of 16. And he learned Shas to the time of the 16 times. I forget now what it says. This individual was a Go'in, a genius of Torah. Besides a chassid, and besides a rebbe, and a tzaddik, simply in learning, he was a genius. He knew all of Torah, So he definitely falls into the category of Rabbah, which we talk about as one of the sages, the Chachamim, the Rabbanim of the Gemara. So, but because of his modesty, just like Rabbah's modesty, they call themselves and they write as a Beinani. And it's another important point, since you mentioned it, Yoini, and I want to really go further, is that he's writing a sefer for us. When you say, Yoini, he's writing the sefer for himself, between you and I, he wasn't writing the sefer for himself. He's a tzaddik. Okay? He doesn't have the taivas and the issues that we have. He's a human being, but he's worked out those issues. Just like David HaMelech. David HaMelech is a human being, was a human being. And if you look at Tanakh, boy, was he a human being. And in this week's Haftarah, Parshas Pekudah, you saw what it says? Hashem says, I promised the kingship to David, Lo'ilam Vod, forever, but he's not going to build the actual Beis HaMikdash, the temple. Why? Dam barav shofachto. Too much blood on your hand. And to me, I was listening to the Haftarah, the Shabbos, and then talking about it by the Kiddush. It blows me away. I mean, could you imagine? Hashem says, you're my man. Right? And at the same time, I'm not letting you build it. When we in our lives say, this is the CEO of a company, this is the boss, right? The boss decides what to do and how to do it. Here we have a situation where Hashem says, this is my man, David HaMelech, but I ain't letting you build it. Why? Because you have too much blood on your hand. And by the way, it doesn't say that his blood that he has in his hand was negative blood. He was a warrior. He fought for Am Yisrael. Chassidus explains this. That the agenda and activity of David was milchama, was engaging in battle for a holy sake, but at the end of the day was engaging in battle. The whole idea of the Beis Hamikdash is shalom, is peace. So it's antithetical to David HaMelech. David HaMelech, by divine hashgacha pratis, was put to situations where you had to fight to survive. His son, Yonasan, Shaul HaMelech, and it doesn't stop. On and on and on. The whole sefer in Tanakh is full of all those that wanted to bring him down, and most of Tehillim, or a large part of Tehillim, is giving praise to Hashem. Save me here, save me there. In other words, David HaMelech, King David HaMelech, from on high, was a neshama that was put into the world to engage in battle on behalf of God. Wonderful. Says the same God, says the same Hashem, but I can't have you actually build the Beis Hamikdash, because the Beis Hamikdash is Shalom. And Shalom is Shloim HaMelech. Shloima, Shalom. Completeness, wholesomeness, in the sense not of taking two and making them one, which is one concept in Shalom, but Kaim Asida B'Ashlamusa, the 15th, the peace, the full moon, Queen of Sheba comes to him. Shloim HaMelech is a dugma, is a semel, a representative of peace. The Beis Hamikdash needs to be peace. So the actual building, your son will do. But kingship, bloodline, Malchus, Moshiach, is David HaMelech. So why am I saying this? Because the Alter Rebbe, who was a tzaddik, so the Alter Rebbe, he himself, Yoini, this is all I'm explaining, answering your question. He himself surely was a tzaddik, Yoini, but he writes a book for us. He's not writing a book for himself because he has nothing better what to do. He wants Yidden to have a manual where they can develop to the best potential. Well, guess what? We're weak. We have urges. We have taivas. That's why he writes it in that way. And as we learned the 53 chapters, especially from chapter 43 through 53, those last 10 chapters are the hardest chapters in Tanya. Very hard, especially those last 2-3 are very hard. So some of his tzaddik-like attitudes came out to me and to those that learn Tanya seriously and have learned by teachers, etc. In those last 10, it's like the Alter Rebbe controlled himself for 43 chapters to write from where we're coming from. But then once he starts with the Ava Rabbah and the levels of love and Ava Kazov, and then he talks about the Mishkan and the Shechina, and he's like taking us on a flight into Mars. He's mamish taking us up there and like, hey, where am I? My head's spinning. I don't know where I am anymore, right? The second section, the Alter Rebbe talks about unity of God, faith in God, Because without unity and faith, you can't begin. And that, by the way, answers the question. Why did the Alter Rebbe change? Why did he want this second section to really be the first section? Because the first section talks about development of self and developing a love and fear all for God. If you don't believe, it's all meaningless. I think we once had a discussion about this. You know, this idea, do you believe that there's only one God and Torah is min hashamayim? Well, before you can begin thinking about Torah, you have to think about who made this world. And if one is not comfortable there and doesn't have a deep understanding and doesn't really study it, everything else is meaningless. What do you mean put on tefillin? Who am I putting on tefillin to? Bozo the clown? Who am I putting on tefillin to? I'm putting on tefillin because God said, who is this God? I don't know who God is. Oh, let me teach you about God. So this section, the next 12 chapters, which consists of the second Sefer, Chelik Sheni, is about who God is. So that was the reason why the Alter Rebbe wanted to start with this. So I asked one of the people in Shul the Shabbos, so why didn't he? So he says, the Rebbe once said, the Rebbe asked this question. Why didn't he start with the second section as number one? You know why? Because practicality speaks louder than anything else. We don't have time for you and I to understand God, and if we don't put on your tefillin until you know how God is reconciled with the universe, how multiplicity is no contradiction to oneness. Because if you go in that route, you're going to get stuck. And you're not going to put on your tefillin. And you're not going to keep your Shabbos. And you're not going to do the chesed. So that speaks louder. Avoida bepoyo, practical implementation of Torah mitzvahs is louder than all philosophies. Even the philosophy about God. And that's why he decided at the end, this is going to be chapter 1, and this is going to be chapter 2. Why he didn't change the language from as I will explain to as I have explained, we don't know. Because if that's the case, the Alter Rebbe, as a good editor, should have made changes wherever he wrote, I will explain. Instead of saying K'moishe Yizba'er, he should have changed it K'moishe Nizba'er. He doesn't do that. I'll point it out to you as when we come to it. So the Rebbe said that was the kind of debate that the Alter Rebbe had. What should be the first section? And by the way, it's interesting to know that the Rebbe writes in letters that when someone wants to become a ger, there's a big question. Halacha, what is he or she allowed to learn? Right? And people wrote to ask the Rebbe, can I teach them Tanya? Especially with Chabad houses. As the years went on, and all over the world, there were many people who wanted to be Gerim, and they wanted to learn, and they became involved with a Chabad rabbi in a Chabad house, etc. And one of the things that many of them teach is Tanya. Are you allowed to teach a non-Jew the first section of the Tanya? And the Rebbe advised them to teach them the second section, not the first section. Because the idea of faith in God and unity of God is applicable to Jews and non-Jews and falls under one of the 7 mitzvahs of Bnei Noach, one of the 7 commandments. So the second section of Tanya, it has broader appeal. Broader halachic appeal, including to non-Jews who are not yet Jewish, who want to be Jewish. And it's not a violation of the halachic prohibition of teaching non-Jews Torah, which is a serious commandment, an issue that many people don't pay attention to, but it's important. I think I told you there was someone who contacted me from Turkey, who wanted to join our shir while we were learning the first section of Tanya. And I asked two serious rabbanim, and they both said no. It's in that case the person didn't even begin the conversion process. Surely that's not right. But even if someone has begun the conversion process, the first section of Tanya is more Torah that would fall under the prohibition not to teach them. Now, is there an exception? There is. And that has to be looked up carefully by the rabbi who's working with a potential convert. But the second section of Tanya, according to the Rebbe at least, and I would say other authorities, is more open for a potential convert. Why? Because it's about faith in God. Faith in God is one of the 7 mitzvahs. So what I'm showing you is that the second section that we're about to learn, which will be tomorrow, because we've taken up the time, Baruch Hashem, with this wonderful conversation and teachings, the second section lends itself to a broader appeal to people. So again, here it's interesting. On one hand, as we will learn, it's like I told you, we're going into the Alter Rebbe's spaceship, as far as the reconciliation of God and the universe and faith and unity. I mean, heavy ideas, things that we need to really put our mind to, right? But at the same time, this is open for everyone. And I think it's important for all you to know this, because you come across sometimes non-Jews, and the Rebbe clearly wants us. I was at the Farbrengen in 1983, 84, where the first time he spoke about the universal mitzvahs, the Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noach. And do you know that the Rebbe in the 1940s, together with Rabbi Dr. Nissim Mendel, wrote a Kitzer Shulchan Aruch for non-Jews? Yes, sir.
I remember very well, I don't know if Moshe remembers it, I was a little bit ahead of his time, but Rabbi Goldstein used to be in the fishbowl with the pamphlets, the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. And he would stop everybody he could and ask, are you a Jew? And if he said yes, he would do one thing. And if they said no, he would give them the pamphlets on the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. I remember very well.
Right. I'll say, because, we're older and more mature, and it's important to know, unfortunately, it didn't accomplish what the Rebbe wanted. It still has not accomplished. The Rebbe was really looking for the establishment to accept the outreach to non-Jews in a way that is kosher and al pi Torah. And it shouldn't be a Lubavitch thing, Rabbi Goldstein and Ann Arbor, and the like, only. Or my friend Rabbi Weg in Oklahoma. And yes, we've had a Vendel Jones, but Vendel Jones never converted, right? And by the way, I also remember in Los Angeles, Avram, Rabbi Shochat from the yeshiva, my Rosh Yeshiva from the Chabad yeshiva, there was a non-Jew who came and he said he wants to convert. And Rabbi Shochat sat him down for hours and basically convinced him, you don't have to convert. You need to be a good non-Jew, a Gentile, and do those 7 mitzvahs. And if you want to go a step further, become a Ger Toshav. Move to Eretz Yisrael and become a Ger Toshav. I remember this guy came in like almost weekly, and Rabbi Shochat spent with him so much time. And we were all like Rabbi, we're like, what are you doing? But he was serious about it. Yes, Moshe.
I was going to say, you mentioned about Vendel Jones. You say he didn't convert, but yeah, he didn't convert.
Right.
Meaning,
Right.
Right.
He was a B'nai Noach. And what I'm saying is that what's happening today is because we've had such intermarriage. So I've told you this also over the years. So the Rebbe and others, there's a Jewish spouse. So, that's a different situation. But in principle, we're not into proselytizing and looking for converts. That's not part of our tradition. what is part of our tradition is Sheva Mitzvah Bnei Noach. And that's what the Rebbe spoke about. And he still couldn't get the consensus of the Orthodox community to back him. You understand? That's why it never really took off. Because you need Klal Yisrael. And I know that, there was an Eretz Yisrael, the Rabbi Chaim Dalfin and others for a while wanted to make a Bezdin and this and that. There have been different attempts. The bottom line is we still have not, as one unified nation, created an acceptable system for everyone. Yes, Hillel.
Can you say more about the Shulchan Aruch for the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach? I didn't know of such a...
Right.
The Rebbe composed it?
The Rebbe composed it. I think it's been printed already today by the Nissen Mindel Publications Foundation. So I would suggest going online just to see if there's any articles about that. I don't know, maybe Moshe, you say there isn't? What?
I haven't looked for it. I have not found it.
You've not found it. Okay, I will try to. I know the person who produced it, Nissen Mendel's son-in-law, a Lubavitcher in Crown Heights. So I'll try to see if he can give me some information or links. But Hillel, as far as more information, I mean, the Rebbe wrote a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch for non-Jews, literally. And you have to you understand, he did this in the 1940s when we're going through a Holocaust and post-Holocaust. So it seems to me that what the Rebbe spoke publicly in the 1980s, 40 years before that, he already was thinking about this idea. Now, of course, he did it in conjunction with permission from his father-in-law, who was the Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, but it is very phenomenal, and I don't think anyone's written about it, but it would be something interesting to research and to write about. Is that already in the 40s we're going through a Holocaust, and look at this man's vision. He's thinking about the future. The Jewish nation is being slaughtered and decimated, and he's looking at the future because we're going to come out. There's going to be remnants, and we have to rebuild. And how are we going to rebuild? By also sharing a message with the nations of the world to be mentioned. I told you, my son-in-law, Rabbi Nadich from Tel Aviv, he was asked to come by the army to up north somewhere to a Muslim school. It's online. This you can find online. Rabbi Eli Nadich, look it up. And he's speaking Sheva Mitzvahs to these little children to try to instill in them belief in God and that we don't kill and murder. It's against, what I'm saying, and all of that, and kindness and goodness. So that's all a derivative of this approach. But truth be said, it never took off. Certain things take off. This has not yet taken off. Let's hope that it does take off, because we need it ever more so now. I see that the Christian right, there's so many are going to Eretz Yisrael with solidarity missions and soup kitchens and volunteerism and everything else. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a wave of non-Jews who want to convert, or at least want to, and therefore you don't need to convert. You don't need to convert. Just believe in God and not in Yoshka, okay? Let's talk about these things. Anyway, great conversation. All part of the Shara Yichud Ve'emunah that we'll get to, and hopefully tomorrow we'll start the actual text. Okay, have a great day, everyone. Sei gesund. Bye-bye. Take care. Shalom.
Sure. Bye-bye.